opinion on Sky News Australia starts now. This is Outsiders.
Good morning and welcome to Outsiders, the show that is to woke virtue signalling cultural Marxism on steroids and identity politics gone mad, what Trump derangement syndrome is to reality. Those deranged and obsessed never-Trumpers insist that Donald Trump is this terrifying narcissist who wants to be some mad dictator and end democracy as we know it. Except, of course, he doesn't.
For some people, the ultimate goal in life has been becoming the President of the United States. Would you like to be the President of the United States?
I really don't believe I would, Ronna, but I would like to see somebody as the President who could do the job, and there are very capable people in this country.
Most people who are capable are not running for office. Most men are frightened of politics today.
It is a shame, isn't it?
Yes.
It is a shame. The most capable people are not necessarily running for political office, and that is a very sad commentary on the country. They had major corporations and they had this and that, but they are not running for political office.
Yes, scary, scary Donald Trump. Worse than Hitler, they call him, an ogre, a monster, a fascist, a white supremacist, a racist, except, of course, he isn't.
Why wouldn't someone like yourself run for political office? You have all the money that you possibly need. You've accomplished a great deal, even though you are only 34. I know there's a lot of things that you possibly can do in the years ahead. Why wouldn't you dedicate yourself to public service?
Because I think it's a very mean life. I would love and I would dedicate my life to this country, but I see it as being a mean life, and I also see it as somebody with strong views and somebody with the kind of views that are maybe a little bit unpopular, which may be right, but may be unpopular, wouldn't necessarily have a chance of getting elected against somebody with no great brain but a big smile. And that's a sad commentary for the political process.
No great brain, but a big smile. How on earth, way back in 1980, did young Donald Trump know he'd be running against this man? Talk about being prescient.
A great, gifted clairvoyant.
Television, in a strange way, has ruined that process, hasn't it?
It's hurt the process very much. I mean, the Abraham Lincolns of the world. Abraham Lincoln would probably not be electable today because of television. He was not a handsome man, and he did not smile.
Abraham Lincoln, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. They're my top three. What are yours? Now, let's grab the latest Outsiders news. Rita, the voice keeps plaguing us. Now a Melbourne council seems to have forgotten that we had a referendum last year where 61% of the population said no thanks.
Well, yes, Melbourne City Council are not happy with their war against Australia Day. They've now decided they're just going to disregard the opinions of the state because the majority of Victorians did vote no against the voice. And Melbourne City Council, really, it's bigger than just the residents of that area and the businesses in that area. It represents Victoria, Melbourne as the capital. And all 11 councillors voted to have a voice, Indigenous voice to council.
Well,
so we've got a state-based voice happening in Victoria that no one voted for, and we've now got a council-based voice. Why bother having a $400 million referendum just to ignore the wishes of the public?
Well, Rita, can you explain this to me, though? Because, you know, we're talking about a city council, a local government area. Their responsibility is all the, the roads, the rates, the rubbish, that sort of thing. Basic service provision. You wouldn't think that there's any sort of thing that's race-based in all of that. So what are they hoping to achieve or do? What are these great policies that somehow impact Indigenous people disproportionately when it comes to picking up the bins and filling potholes?
Exactly.
Well, you would think so, but no. And they would argue, well, our electorate in this particular council is particularly progressive, so we are serving their interests and their wishes. But it's just more divisive political games, like you said, really not sticking to their lane of what they're supposed to be. And this is what we keep getting with councils. They're full of these people with delusions of grandeur, people who are not in state parliament, aren't in federal parliament, but they want to keep making points about national and international issues. And this should be a national issue, should not even be state, let alone council.
Well, it's not only in Melbourne Council, it's South Australia. They're also trying to do the voice madness. We'll be speaking shortly to a young Liberal there in South Australia. That'll be Nicola Centofanti. She'll be coming on the show shortly, and Alex Antic later on in the show. So lots to talk about there. Big show coming up. But first, want to just give a little bit of a warning that we're going to talk about the Teals now, and some of the content may be a bit distressing, what we're talking about to viewers due to what happened and the graphic nature of it. But last week we told you how the Teals had all signed this letter. Here it is. We've got all the signatures. This letter begging Penny Wong to start resending millions of Australian tax dollars, your money, to UNRWA. That's the globally discredited United Nations Relief Works Agency, which is riddled with proven links and ties to Hamas. And we've detailed those many times in the past on this show. This week, the United Nations finally admitted that Hamas raped and sexually tortured women on October 7th. They also raped corpses. They are still, as we speak, raping the kidnapped girls. In other words, the Teals, with their letter, want to see your money possibly falling into the hands of and funding some of the people responsible for murdering, raping, butchery and depravity of the very worst kind. Here is the recording released by the Israeli Defense Forces of what they believe to be an UNRWA worker, speaking in euphemisms describing how he and another man took an Israeli female captive on October 7th and brought her home. He then jokingly refers to her as his horse, a noble horse, and the two of them laugh about it.
لقيت شيء؟ ايه؟ لقيت شيء؟ جبنا فرس يا حاج. ايش جبت؟ خيل فرس. جاب حصان؟ صار اصلا اصيل مش حصان كديش تبع القرعان. انت ومين جبته؟ مين
These people are sick, and many more links between UNRWA and Hamas have been discovered. So let me repeat, if you are sending Australian tax dollars to UNRWA and insisting our government does so in a letter with your signature on it, you risk sending Jewish Australians money, hard-earned money, to fund the very terrorists who butchered and raped 1,200 Jews in the worst pogrom since the Holocaust. So let us read to you again all the names of the Teals who signed this disgusting letter. Rita.
We've got Allegra Spender, Zoe Daniels, Monique Ryan, Kate Cheney, Sophie Scamps, Kylie Tink, Zali Stegel, along with Helen Haynes and Andrew Wilkie. Now, this week we learned that not one but two Jewish organisations cancelled Allegra Spender from attending their events. And I quote here from Courage to Care, an organisation that vows never again to the Holocaust. They wrote, "Next week we'll be holding our luncheon to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Courage to Care New South Wales. Our guest speaker was to have been Allegra Spender. In light of recent events, it has been mutually agreed that it would be in the best interest of our organisation if she was to withdraw. The recent event we referred to was a letter to Foreign Minister Penny Wong, signed by Ms. Spender and others."
A few days later, a Jewish college also retracted by mutual agreement with Allegra Spender for her not to attend their function. Now, Allegra Spender is the Teal MP for Wentworth, which has one of Australia's largest Jewish communities. As the Australian Jewish Association's David Adler pointed out, Courage to Care is all about Holocaust education for never again. UNRWA, via its education with Hamas, is all about do it again. They are incompatible.
It appears the Jews of Australia have finally been waking up to what I've been warning them for years. Labor, the Greens, and now the Teals are not your friends. The sheer chutzpah of the Teals, probably not a word the Teals are familiar with, the sheer chutzpah in pretending to be ex or disillusioned Liberals and passing themselves off to the electorate as such. They are hardcore leftists through and through and should be treated as such. Do not vote for them. As Greg Sheridan writes brilliantly this week, there is currently a global pandemic of hatred against the Jews. In such an appalling worldwide situation, history demands, and this is my words, not Greg's, we all show maximum support for the Jews at this critical point in time. Shame on the Teals for this disgraceful letter. Rita, so there's already a reaction against Allegra Spender, which we've detailed, understandably. You have to show support, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I think the eyes of a lot of voters, not just Jewish voters, but particularly Jewish voters, have been opened because those Teal seats do have typically a disproportionate number of Jewish Australians in them. And I think they need to explain themselves. They need to explain why they've signed this letter, why they're advocating for this funding to be restored, given everything we have learned and are still learning about this discredited group, which, again, we've been warning about that group on this program for years, well before October 7. There were plenty of signs of Hamas having their having some control on what they were doing, and just the really ugly indoctrination that they were funding, never mind what we saw on October 7th.
Well, more than that too, Rita, I really wonder if in seats like Wentworth, where they turfed out Dave Sharma, who was a great friend of Israel, and in fact a former Australian ambassador to Israel, for Allegra Spender, whether or not there's an awful lot of buyer's remorse happening
100%.
right there.
What about Kooyong?
Josh Frydenberg.
Kooyong, Josh Frydenberg,
Ryan.
another great example. And, what did we see happen? What are the end result of that 2022 election? Well, you have seen a strengthening of Labor seats where there is a strongly pro-Palestinian and some would say pro-Hamas if you saw the demonstrations after
look at one
October
now.
7th.
We'll look at one in a second.
And at the same time, a weakening of Jewish representation because they have lost some of their great advocates and friends in Parliament. And no wonder Labor is so divided and getting pulled to the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian side on all of this, losing its moral compass because those other voices are not there in the Parliament anymore.
Well, this show will be exposing the Teals one by one, week after week. We're going after them because they need to be out of Parliament. I'll be talking later in the programme about Kate Chaney, the Perth Teal. Interesting article that she had yesterday in the Sydney Morning Herald. That's later on in the show. But let's have a look at Brisbane protests yesterday. These are pro-Palestinian protests in Brisbane. Here we go. They're yelling intifada on the streets of Brisbane. Intifada, Rita.
I do wonder whether they know what that means. They know the full meaning, whether this is ignorance or perhaps worse, they know precisely what it means and they're changing.
Either one is as bad as
I think they know. I think a lot of them, you can say that some of this stuff among some young people is just performative kind of idiocy that young people do when they get sucked into whatever the big sort of crowd or cause is. But, this sort of stuff, it's very hard to ignore. And the crazy thing is that the people who are joining these riots and demonstrations and everything else, they are calling for the restoration and the success of a government that hates everything that they enjoy and love in a liberal society.
Oh, you want to have consistency?
Yes, I would like some consistency,
from these people.
Rita. Yes.
Are you crazy?
Crazy,
but
I
just
know.
think for a second, if you're a Jewish person, a visibly Jewish person who perhaps has a Hanukkah or a Star of David, you wouldn't be comfortable going into a capital city when they're having these rallies pretty much every weekend because it is hostile. We've already seen people who have
in
been
Sydney and Melbourne, we know that Jewish students won't wear anything that marks them out as going to a Jewish school, as being of the Jewish faith. You know, this is disgraceful in 2024 Australia.
Well, the pro-Palestinians are actively online as well, doing what happened during the 1930s in Germany. They're targeting businesses. There was in Melbourne a restaurant, a French restaurant, that simply had up a poster which had the famous Charlie Hebdo cover on it as part of one of other things. And this restaurant was targeted by pro-Palestinian activists till they felt they had to take down this poster. I mean, that's just a tiny example of the sort of stuff that goes on.
Because these days, businesses can be really terrorised online. They all rely on reviews. People look up, particularly restaurants, before they go there. So if you get on Google and put in a few bad reviews, it can destroy a business. It can cost them a lot of money. And this is what the activists are doing. And there's no price to pay for that. They don't even have to bother going to the site and picketing. They can just do it all on their phone.
So if you happen to know that French restaurant in Melbourne, make sure you go and show your support for them in the face of this sort of appalling behaviour. Let's look at London, where here's, you know, exactly what we're talking about. I think it was at Hyde Park Corner, Speaker's Corner, but it might not have been. But have a look. This is the sort of thing happening in London.
What should you all do to the ones you hear? What should you all do? Tell me.
Yeah, we should all beat the
You should all beat the of me. Go for it, all of you. Come on, all of you. Beat the out of me. All of you, come on.
We're in the UK.
Just so you know, this guy saying they should all beat me up. The police are stood here doing nothing when they're literally inciting violence. Jews, pay attention. Leave the UK while you can.
It's not about
Leave
Jews.
this country while you can.
So this poor guy, police standing by while a bunch of pro-Palestinian supporters threatened to beat him up. Rita, this sort of stuff.
I thought threatening violence was, I don't know, is it not part of the hate speech laws we keep hearing about in the UK?
If they'd threatened violence with the wrong pronouns, they'd have been marched straight off to.
I've got more footage from you from the UK. This has just happened. This man's an Iranian activist who is anti-Hamas. Have a look at what the supposedly pro-Palestinian protesters do to him. I mean, he's not there saying anything pro-Israel. He's not there saying anything about anti-Palestinian. He's just saying Hamas is a terrorist group. See the reaction. And despite the footage is, of course, much longer than that, despite being assaulted, manhandled, the cops drag him away, put him in handcuffs, arrest him, until they eventually actually looked at the footage and thought, oh, no, you didn't assault anyone, you were the one assaulted. But I asked the question...
And this happened in Melbourne, didn't it? This is what happened in Melbourne last week.
Sydney, this is the same thing.
Melbourne.
You know, like, we can all sit here and laugh and go, ha, the UK, they're gone and everything like that. Sorry, but New South Wales police here are incredibly weak on this. Victoria Police. They will go after anybody who is doing anything that might provoke this violent mob and say, oh, you're going to be hustled away. We're going to put you in handcuffs if you don't leave. We're going to threaten you with arrest. But that sends the message to these terrorist sympathizers that they have control of the streets and the police have their back. This is going to end horrifically.
It is mob rule. The cops are siding with the violent mob because they're greater in number and it's easier to target the individual, the peaceful individual who's actually not doing anything wrong. The question I ask, because we keep hearing from these pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli protesters, we're not standing with Hamas. This is nothing about supporting Hamas. That protester that they attacked and had to be dragged away by police for his own safety, supposedly, the only sign he was holding up was Hamas are terrorists. So why would that be something that would enrage these people?
Good
they
point,
should be able to march with him and say, yep, we're with you. Hamas are terrorists. Let's free Palestine from Hamas.
And remember, everything here that is happening, all of these people who are complaining about what is happening to the Palestinian people and the civilians and the children and everything like that, all of this could be ended today if Hamas simply surrendered. But no one ever calls for Hamas to surrender. Why? Because I think they're on Hamas's side, just
Well,
quietly.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, James. And I repeat, with all that's going on in the world, global pandemic of hatred, as Greg Sheridan calls it, if your politicians, your Teals, your local representatives are so stupid, they sign a letter calling for more money, Australian tax dollars, to be going, they are either incredibly stupid, naive, gullible, idiotic, call it what you will, or they're on the wrong side. Either way, they should not be representing you in the Australian Parliament. Let's talk about Lord Balfour, James.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Have a look at this here footage. Going to play you some footage of a student at Cambridge University having a go at a portrait of Lord Balfour, who authored the Balfour Declaration, which was the original sort of British document after the fall or at the fall of the Ottoman Empire, which started to carve up that part of the world. Look at what they are teaching at this high, fine university, Cambridge. Now, of course, this being the age of narcissism, the only thing people could do while this vandalism was taking place, vandalism of a portrait painted, by the way, by a Jew, but that's another story, was simply stand there and film and not tackle and stop this wanton destruction. Of course, the university has gone and said, oh, we're so sorry this happened. We're going to offer counseling to anybody traumatized by this event, but so far the student hasn't been expelled. But Rita, I think you noticed something too about this student.
Well, this student just typifies this indulged, entitled, feral, far-left Marxist cohort. That backpack you saw her wearing while she was ripping up that fine piece of artwork, it's only worth about, I don't know, £1,700. It's a Mulberry backpack.
Right.
Unless she's got some sort of rip-off. But by all accounts, she's a rather privileged soul. And the entitlement they feel, and you can see why they feel that entitlement, because when we had those BLM riots in the UK, I'm not just talking about the craziness that occurred in the US, where they ripped down statues, threw them in bodies of water, and there were no consequences. They didn't replace the statue. You give a license to these people to do as they wish. When you give them a slap on the wrist when they go and try to destroy a piece of artwork, there they actually destroyed it. It had no protection and it's gone. I mean,
You encourage this sort of activism, vandalism, you're going to get more and more of it unless you clamp down hard on it, unless the police do what they're supposed to do, more importantly, unless the judges do what they're supposed to do and throw these people in jail. Meanwhile, all around the West, people are out marching pro-Palestinian, showing their affection for the Palestinian cause. The Saudis, Rita, the Saudis have come out and said the Palestinians aren't worth a toothpick.
Ouch.
So there you go. I mean, I would have thought that the Saudis would have been
well, this is
supporting
I
get confused here, the Middle East. So confusing, isn't it?
Well, the truth is, and it's something the protesters in the street and the Teals and Penny Wong and everybody else just pretends isn't occurring. The Arab nations, Middle East, not one of them is stepping in and taking a single Palestinian refugees. There's more Palestinian refugees in Australia right now, rehoused in the last few weeks, than there are anywhere in the Middle East.
But, Rita, remember, those Palestinians had incredible intensive security checks that went on for at least 60 minutes.
6 to 7 minutes.
At least 60 minutes by a Canberra bureaucrat.
This is the thing, too, is that look at the history of the Palestinians. What was the very first thing that Egypt, next door to Gaza, did? They ran a battalion of tanks up to the Gaza Strip to make sure that the Palestinians didn't try and break into Egypt.
Well, they've got a massive wall.
The United States
Massive
right
wall.
now is building this whole pier, this insane idea to build a pier for Gaza to send aid in, which will then be stolen by Hamas and make American troops a target. So well done, Joe Biden. But they could send aid through Egypt. They don't want to. The Kuwaitis kicked the Palestinians out. This whole thing, we have such a dumb idea of how the world works in the West because nobody pays attention to what's actually happening in the Arab world.
Exactly.
Yep.
Now, just very quickly, Ireland, James, referendum.
This is huge. This is a massive, we've spoken a lot on this program about the way the political class in Ireland has basically been attacking the very nature of what it is to be Irish with political correct woke policies, mass immigration and the rest. Well, there was a huge defeat, and I think the numbers are going to come in at least 2-1 no on 2 referenda that they were trying to put through, redefining the family, redefining women, redefining the nature of even whether or not a marriage is just between 2 people, which a lot of people thought was a sop to polygamy that might be coming in through some of the mass migration in Ireland. The Irish people resoundingly rejected what their political class is doing to them. It's a great moment of fight back for sanity and soundness. But, Ireland, I worry it is too late for them, given how far down that path they've gone.
But this shows that people are not along with that journey. It's just that political class has let them down. And it wasn't just the political class who were all in on these changes. It was kind of like Brexit and Trump in 2016
and The Voice.
and The Voice. The corporates, the media, pretty much every elite institution that has power and influence was pushing this, and the people said, no thanks.
Because what it is they realize that behind all of these referendums is a push to rewrite the very nature of what it is to be, whether it's Irish or Australian, and the
culture,
and the culture of your country.
This is the culture war.
This is the culture war, and there's an attempt by all of these big sort of blobs of corporate elites and government elites to remake these nations. And people are sick of it. And they're saying no. And it's great, but we need more of it.
Absolutely. But this is why the left keeps saying, oh, you're just fighting the culture wars. Yes, because when we fight the culture wars, we win. And we must win for the sake of liberal Western democracies.
And if we don't have a...
You have to fight.
The side that fights will always beat the side that wants to be left alone. And for too long, conservatives in this country have just said, we just want to live our lives, be left alone. But you got to get interested. You got to engage, because the culture wars are going to happen whether you like it or not. And even if you're not interested in them, they're interested in you.
And if you don't have a culture, if they take away your culture, if your culture's gone, you've got nothing.
Exactly. And yet 60-40 was guaranteed to be the majority, conservative majority on any cultural issue you put up. 60-40 at least, probably 70-30, 80-20 and most. Up next, Rita's reality check. And we'll speak to, as I said, Nicola Centofanti about the state-based voice in South Australia in a tick.
You're watching Outsiders with your host, Rowan Pansexual Dean, James Two-Spirit Morrow, and I'm Rita Panahi. Pronouns, Persian and Princess, and I identify as non-binary.
Oh, very good.
Very good. I'm also a hawk.
My name is Horace, and I'm a red-tailed hawk. In our world, I do have the body of a hawk, but while fronting, I consider myself a Therian, because I am in a human body, but my identity is still a hawk. I am doing my best to come to terms with living in a human body.
I can't tell what's real or satire anymore. I thought she was a Hawthorn supporter. I'm sorry. Now, we're about to talk to an MP of a state that voted 64% no in the race-based referendum. And guess what? They're getting a race-based voice. Don't you love democracy? And you know what rhymes with democracy? Hypocrisy. And wowee, we've had a lot of it this week with the latest racism furor. As I wrote in the Herald Sun during the week, it has been fascinating and often amusing to watch the perpetually outraged, race-obsessed activist and media types tie themselves in knots trying to make sense of the Sam Kerr saga. At first, they were pretty confused, but it wasn't long before that confusion turned into indignation when it became clear that the alleged victim of Sam Kerr's racist comment is a white male police officer. The horror. Now, they were back on solid ground here. They resumed doing what they do best, blaming racism and misogyny for everything, including Kerr's predicament. Any sort of penalty, if she is guilty, is going to be an enormous fall from grace for one of Australia's biggest sporting stars. She earned more than $3 million in the year leading up to last year's World Cup, where her fame and earning capacity soared even further. But the truth is, Kerr's treatment this week has been markedly different than what we would see from a high-profile athlete who was accused of racism. She had everyone from the Prime Minister to state premiers to idiot sportscasters rush to her defence. Some claiming very, very strongly that you cannot be racist against a white man, certainly not as a woman of colour. We've had the usual cavalcade of woke nincompoops, including Peter Bandana Man Fitzsimons and Craig Foster. They embarrassed themselves. The latter issued a grovelling apology, not to the police officer, mind you, or the cab driver who reportedly called the cops, accusing Kerr of throwing up in his cab and presumably declining to adequately compensate him. No, Craig apologised to Sam. Suddenly, folks who are normally outraged by any suggestion of racism, real or imagined, were lining up to defend Sam Kerr, even if she is guilty of the offence, arguing that racism towards white people isn't even a thing. Then there were the feminists claiming that Kerr is being treated unfairly because she is a woman. Just don't ask these people what is a woman, because they struggle. Now, let's start with Senator Lydia Thorpe, who wrote, "Replace all statues of Captain Cook with statues of Sam Kerr, our one true captain." Notice how she doesn't even use capital letters for Captain Cook, but she's not semi-literate, folks. She knows how to use capitals when she refers to Sam Kerr. She's making a point. Former Labor MP Emma Hussar declared Kerr was a legend. She wrote, "Sam Kerr should tell more men they're stupid white bastards, especially those in powerful positions, and continue her good service to Australian women everywhere. Sam is a legend." Not to be outdone, the Sydney Morning Herald ran a headline asking, if Sam Kerr was a straight white housewife, would she stand accused of racism? Yeah, and there'd be no confused clowns trying to defend her, you can be sure of that. Substitute the word white for black in what she's alleged to have said, and you can be sure that the usual suspects would be up in arms, calling for her to be stood down and more. And talking about confused clowns, one of our favourites, writer Jane Caro, was again playing the gender card, claiming that Kerr was perhaps being treated more harshly because she's a woman.
Dear. I hope that we don't treat a female football player worse than we treat male football players who fall from grace, which, you know, many of them have done, and in much more serious ways than Sam Kerr has just done. Because we sometimes have this double standard where we expect women to behave much better than men, and when they don't, we punish them even more harshly.
These intellectually dishonest positions are almost comical. We all know if a white player, male or female, had similarly sledged a black or brown police officer, the consequences for them would be catastrophic. And not just with the media, but with their football club and sponsors. But for many Australians, Sam Kerr's biggest offence isn't what she allegedly said in a heated moment. It's the hypocrisy of lecturing others about racism and then allegedly falling short of that standard herself. Personally, I find the whole notion of having mean words criminalised absurd, that these laws exist and can be used to pursue charges that can take years to finalise is, in my opinion, grossly unfair. But presumably the race-obsessed activist class, including Kerr herself, back such laws. And if you back these measures, you've got to understand that it applies equally to all. You cannot have some sort of an Orwellian, some animals are more equal than others interpretation that exempts certain races from prosecution. Now, before I go, let's have a quick bit of fun with the mass unhinging happening in the US thanks to consecutive polls showing Donald Trump beating Joe Biden and, according to some polls, beating him quite comfortably, beating him in the crucial swing states and even beating him by 6 points among Hispanic voters. Who could have thought that? That has seen the Democrats' propaganda arm go into full-blown weapon-grade gaslighting. Let's check in on MSNBC talking about Biden's cognitive ability.
Now, he's cogent, but I undersold him when I said he was cogent. He's far beyond cogent. In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been. Intellectually, analytically, Because he's been around for 50 years. Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years.
No. Never go full-blown MSNBC. Just do it in small doses, because that could happen. You can seem utterly deranged. And it wasn't just MSNBC. We also had this advice from CNN for the Biden campaign.
If he's going to be shameless, which is his greatest asset, the shamelessness of him, is then Biden has to get in there very hard and go rapist, racist, fascist, over and over and over again. And then the trials are happening at the same time. He's just had to pay, he's just $93 million poorer right now. And just hammer it in with those three things: rapist, racist, fascist.
Rapist, racist, fascist. Just keep hammering that. That's Kara Swisher on CNN. And I think I speak for Conservatives everywhere when I say I sincerely hope the Democrats follow her advice to the letter.
Fantastic, Rita. Well, if that's the best Biden ever, I hate to think what the others are like. Now, in an insult, as we were saying, to the 64% of South Australia who voted no in the National Indigenous Voice referendum last year, South Australia's Premier, Peter Malinauskas, has pushed ahead with his plan for a state Indigenous voice. Joining us now from the forefront of this campaign is the opposition leader in South Australia's Legislative Council, Nicola Centofanti. Nicola, great to see you. Thanks for coming on Outsiders. Love the paintings. Good morning. Thanks for having me. Love your paintings there as well. They look fantastic. Now, tell us, Nicola, why on earth, what do the people of South Australia think? They voted against, overwhelmingly against, the voice. He's bringing it back. What's going on?
That they did. And can I say the hypocrisy and the arrogance is alive and well here in South Australia with this Labor government. You know, as you've pointed out, 64% of South Australians voted against the federal referendum, but yet Peter Malinauskas and this state Labor government are continuing to press on with their state-based voice. And, you know, can I just make the point? I think this government should really be looking into the reasons as to why the community didn't want a federal voice. And that is because they are the same reasons as to why people don't want a state voice. They don't want a state voice because it's another layer of bureaucracy. It's essentially a fourth chamber, which is going to be incredibly costly for our state when we are in the midst of a cost of living crisis, and they don't want further division based on race.
James.
Well, that's the heart of it, isn't it? The division based on race and codifying that into law. But tell me, I understand that you've had a bill sitting, waiting to go since November in the upper house to repeal this voice. Tell us about this, and why is this bill languishing? Why hasn't this been put to a vote?
Yeah, James, that's a really good question. You know, there has been this repeal bill that's been sitting on our notice paper since November of last year. And we, the Liberal opposition, have put our position of support on the record for that repeal bill. And as you know, we were the first state Liberal team to come out publicly opposing the federal referendum and supporting that no vote. So, you know, that repeal bill has been sitting on the notice paper and I have repeatedly encouraged that member to bring that bill to a vote, and that hasn't happened yet, which is incredibly disappointing because I think, you know, the people of South Australia deserve for that bill to be voted on so that they know when they make their decision going to the polls in 2026 for our state election where our parties stand.
Rita.
Now, I would think one of the reasons why South Australians were so strongly against the voice was because they had a taste of it already, because SA was already down the path of having this state-based voice. They knew how flawed it was, how divisive it was. If the Liberals are back in power, do you promise to abolish this chamber, this additional layer of bureaucracy?
Yeah, and so Rita, you know, we've got elections occurring at the moment, and we'll have the state-based voice, shall we say, elected next Saturday, and we've got 2 years to look at how this this fourth chamber, fourth layer of bureaucracy works, and our leader has come out saying that if it isn't doing a good job, and then when we will absolutely be looking to repeal this piece of legislation. And Rita, can I say, if it's one thing that I've learnt since coming into Parliament, it's that more bureaucracy equals less outcomes.
100%, Nicola, 100%.
100%, but
and I think, you know, the thing to remember is ultimately we all want to see practical outcomes for Aboriginal communities, but this is not the way to do it. And, you know, we should be taking the advice of Senator Jacinta Price and Senator Karen Little, both of who are calling for an audit on or inquiry into the billions of dollars that have been spent closing the gap every single year, and more accountability on that spending.
But why do you need to see 2 years of this chamber operating to have a position that you're going to abolish it? Because on principle, the fact that this is a race-based chamber, the fact that 64% of South Australians have made it clear they do not want this sort of divisive race-based politics, can't you just have a firm position rather than having a wait-and-see approach?
Well, look, our position is that we're supportive of repealing this piece of legislation. I mean, we're on the record saying that we support One Nation's repeal bill. So, but the fact of the matter is we're not in government for another 2 years. So, unfortunately, South Australians are going to be stuck with this for the next 2 years.
One thing, Nicola, apart from supporting you and One Nation on this, there is a petition, don'tdividesa.com.au, a petition where people can show that they are against this South Australian voice. Some of the comments underneath the petition are pretty revealing. We said no and we mean it. South Australia voted no to the voice. Now the Premier is turning his back on South Australians. This is unconstitutional, says this particular commentator. He should resign and take his followers with him. That's talking about Peter Malinauskas. Nicholas Satavanti, thanks so much for coming on Outsiders. Great to have you here, and we'll chat again, and good luck opposing the South Australian voice. Thanks so much. After the break, we'll speak to Renee Heath about the state of the Victorian Liberals, plus a bit of wacademia and lefty lunacy. In a tick. Well, the impotent Victorian Liberal leader John Pesutto has been forced to declare that he is a fighter as two of his most senior advisors abandon ship, and his court case against Moira Deeming looms. Well, the knives may be out for Mr. Prosciutto, but remember to slice them very fine. Sorry, couldn't resist that one. Joining us to discuss this and much more is Victorian Liberal MP Renee Heath. Renee, great to have you here on Outsiders. So we do get a lot of mileage out of the Victorian Liberal Party. What's the state of play at the moment in the Victorian Liberal Party, Renee?
Look, John's office obviously has had some shifts in staffing, but that really is a matter for his office and his office alone, and not for the Liberal Party at all. I think there's a lot of talent in the Victorian Liberal Party room, but at the moment, you know, John's doing a good job and we're behind him.
That's the very political answer, exactly what I would expect, Renee. That's fantastic. Rita?
Yes, we'll leave that for you know, we'll come back to, you know, if there were hypothetically to be a leadership challenge.
That's right.
Who Renee might
But my
back.
support is
the coach has the full support of the board.
Exactly.
But I do want to ask.
I don't deal in hypotheticals, Rita.
But let's talk about the state of the Victorian budget, because Victoria does have the highest state debt by some margin, and just this week we learned, Renee, that has got even significantly worse. There's been a $12 billion blowout in a debt that's already around, what, $120-odd billion. What are we going to look forward to? A very high taxing, high cutting budget?
I think so. Victoria's debt is at record highs and it has been for quite some time, and the Victorian Labor government has done absolutely nothing to deal with it. Their way is big projects, big spending, big taxes, and it doesn't look as if that's going to change anytime soon. We've been putting a lot of pressure on the government about their irresponsible spending. I think one of the areas that everyone's talking about is the suburban rail loop. Jacinta Allen really needs to take a stand on that. We do not have the money to be spending on projects like this. I fear that if we continue down this path with big construction projects and big budget blowouts, Victorians' critical infrastructure like health, education and roads are going to continue to deteriorate, and we are in a real crisis.
James.
Well, Renee, the question I guess I would have looking at Victoria from New South Wales here is, the state is broke, but you've seen the leader go back and forth on treaty and a whole lot of other things that just seem like, there's not a lot of intellectual, ballast there in terms of where the party is different to Labor. And what would voters in Victoria get differently in terms of, let's say, economic management, crime, which is a huge issue? Would the Liberals in power have, a real point of difference on these things, or would it just be sort of a light version of the same? Because I think a lot of people are concerned that at the moment, that's where a lot of the party room is.
Look, we haven't released our policies yet, but the Liberal Party has always been the party of strong economic management, and we haven't ever stepped away from that. In terms of the treaty you mentioned, I was delighted to see that that we've walked away from that. We are not supporting the treaty anymore. I think that there was a huge change after the referendum, and I think the Victorian Party has listened, because it was a huge no vote in Victoria, and we responded to that and walked away from the treaty. I think that's something really exciting to look forward to.
No, Renee, that is terrific. I absolutely agree with you. But it's better, if you want to get into government, you have to lead. You should have been leading the no vote, not following the no vote. But can I just ask, Renee, on a topic I hear from a lot of Victorians about, you've got these windmills being planned by Crispo and all up and down some of the most beautiful beaches in Victoria. Where do the Liberals stand on opposing this? Are you opposing the windmills and all the net zero madness?
Well,
or are you going to wait to follow? Are you going to wait to follow? Which is it going to be, lead or follow? Sorry.
Well, I can only speak for myself, and this week I did abstain from the vote with the new energy targets, because I do, there's always going to be a vast difference of opinions within the Liberal Party. That's who we are. I personally am there to represent the Eastern Victoria region, which is a region that has been obliterated by Labor's green policies. So I did take a stand on that one this week, because we've had closure of industry, we've had the energy industry, which provided an amazing amount of jobs in the Latrobe Valley. Labor promised us a transition to renewables. We haven't seen any, and that's been 15 years. Also, we've had the closure of the native timber industry, which has obliterated even more communities. And now windmills solar panels, whatever it is going to begin to cannibalise farmland, and I think that is something that's worth taking a stand on.
It absolutely is, and Renee's one of the ones who's a fighter, who's doing solid work. But there's no doubt that the Vic Libs have again signed up to some radical emission targets that are perhaps even bolder than the Anthony Albanese governments, and that's the Victorian State Lib. So it is what it is. Just before you go, crime is a huge issue in Victoria. It's a huge issue in much of the country, youth crime in particular. We know Labor want to raise the age of criminal responsibility. They're going to do that this year from 10 to 12. And then go from 12 to 14. Can we at least have a commitment from the Libs that this is something they're going to stand against? Because we've got an enormous amount of crime happening from the ages of 12 up.
Well, I can't give any commitments. I'm not the shadow minister or in the leadership, but crime is a major issue, and it's particularly it's a major issue because we don't have the right amount of policing. That's something that I've continually stood up for. Also, you know, I've really advocated for stronger stalking reform, particularly after the Celeste Mano case. I don't know if you've been following that one, where a young girl was stalked and brutally murdered by a man that she used to work with. She followed all of the rules. She got an intervention order. He broke that intervention order and then broke into her home and stabbed her to death. And there has been a report done with 45 recommendations that was tabled in Parliament in September 2022. And the Labor government has done absolutely nothing about it, even though they promised Celeste's family that they would. This was a brutal murder. I attended the plea hearing because I think that there's a huge disconnect between what happens in Spring Street sometimes and how it affects the lives of everyday Australians. This is a big issue. This is only one area of crime, but I've continually asked, you know, why haven't we implemented these 45 recommendations? The work has been done and they've refused to do anything about it. So I think crime is something that we really need to get a handle on. Also, there's been 45 police stations that have either reduced their hours or shut down entirely. This is not okay. It is putting the community at risk, and it just shows that Labor has lost control of this state, and we need to see a change.
Absolutely. Renee Heath, fantastic stuff. And the family of Celeste Mano and others must be so pleased with the work you are doing. It's critical work, and good luck with that. And Victoria is very lucky to have you there fighting that fight. Thank you, Renee Heath, for coming on Outside. It's great to chat to you. Coming up, lots more. We'll be talking to Alex Antic in a tick. Hello, you're watching Outsiders with Rita, the yellow-bellied Panahi, James Numbat Morrow, and myself, Rowan, the pig-footed bandicoot Dean. Yes, according to the Australian Government's Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, quote, more than 1,700 species and ecological communities are known to be threatened and at risk of extinction. End of quote. They include, of course, everything from the southern gastric brooding frog to the delightful Banksia montana mealybug. But in the name of protecting these and many other no doubt worthy species, the Albanese government, and in particular Tanya Plibersek and Chris Bowen, are trying to sneak through Parliament one of the most dangerous pieces of legislation this nation has ever seen. Shrouded in secrecy, deception and obfuscation, this insidious new set of laws which will decimate mining, agriculture, tourism and much-needed development is being drafted under the touchy-feely, innocuous-sounding name of the Nature Positive Plan.
Ooh.
Ta-da!
The Nature Positive Plan sets out the Australian government's commitments to strengthen our environmental laws and start to create the framework for a nature-positive Australia where we protect and repair nature. This is the largest change to Australia's national environmental laws since the introduction of the EPBC Act in the year 2000. The reforms will ensure our national environmental laws are outcomes-focused and nature-positive.
Oh.
Our nature-positive laws will ensure we have a nature-positive Australia because we are introducing nature-positive laws. The classic Canberra circular argument, which tells you nothing. So let's dive deep into the Burley Griffin swamp and try and find out what's really going on here. Have a listen to one of the bureaucrats behind this madness, James Tregurtha, the division head of the Nature Positive Task Force, spelling it out in classic Canberra jargon.
It's also important to note that the new laws will introduce this concept of unacceptable impacts. So, for example, if there was to be identified an area of habitat that was determined to be critical to the ongoing survival of the koala as a species in the wild, then that could be determined, may well be recorded in the recovery strategies that Ilse's talking about, but certainly would be able to be taken into account in decision-making where where Environment Protection Australia would then be able to say that area is of such significance that no impacts would be permitted to that particular area of habitat, whether that's for the koala or any of the many other threatened species that are currently listed at the Commonwealth level.
So, quick translation. Basically, we climate-obsessed bureaucrats will soon have all the power to stop any development whatsoever simply by declaring that the development will have an unacceptable impact upon one of many thousands of threatened species. Carry on, James.
The requirement to be nature positive through the regulatory system will mean that where there are impacts on habitat, through necessary development, whether that's housing, critical minerals, Australia's transition to renewable energy infrastructure, it will be a requirement of those impacts where they are permitted to deliver a nature positive outcome through things like offsetting actions or contributions through a payment system in order to ensure that overall there will be a net gain for those threatened species, as Ilse was describing.
Translation: if you really want your project to go ahead, you evil miners or developers, it's going to cost you a fortune, big time. Now, let's have a piercing question from one of the other Canberra bureaucrats.
This is a good one. How will these laws be enforced and monitored? Will there be a standard?
The Nature Positive Plan does mention the potential for a compliance and enforcement standard, but the compliance and enforcement standard, the way the Nature Positive Plan conceived of that was to wait until the Environment Protection Australia entity was stood up as an entity in its own right, because the advice to the Minister in making a compliance and enforcement standard, we wanted that to be strongly informed by the new independent regulator.
Whoa, 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 steady on, hold your horses. This rings a bell. We'll legislate it first, then fill in the detail and the scope of its powers afterwards. Just like The Voice. Same old sneaky Albo, keep the punters in the dark. Here's another Canberra bureaucrat. My goodness, they do seem to mushroom. Filling in even more detail by not giving us any details.
We don't anticipate that the current definitions of critical habitats will be exactly the same under the new legislation. So there's not a direct translation. And as I say, that's largely because we've actually got a few different ways that we're approaching critical habitat at the moment.
Okay, that's clear as mud then. Translation: basically, critical habitat is whatever we say it is at the time we decide to tell you what it is. And finally, well, let's not beat about the bush here. What's this really all about?
Next question. Will the new laws allow approval of fossil fuel projects?
So, as now, the new laws won't distinguish between the nature of a project that is being presented to Environment Protection Australia, or in the current case under the EPBC Act, for approval. So applications will be able to be made across a range of sectors that would include fossil fuel projects. The Minister for the Environment will be obliged, where those projects are captured by the safeguard mechanism, to ensure that that information is then provided on to the Climate Change Minister, to ensure that minister, and through the safeguard mechanism, has full information in relation to the emissions profile of those particular projects. But other than that, they will progress through the regulatory system like any other project.
All about the impact, of course.
So there you have it. Translation: all roads lead back to Bowen, Chris Bowen. Mandatory reporting of emissions, giving the Climate Change Minister, that's Bowen, the ultimate say on any development project in this country where the bureaucrats have determined there is an unacceptable impact on a critical habitat. But the definition of those will be filled in later. So arguably we could be looking at Chris Bowen having the final say over all new tourism developments, all new roads, new hospitals, new small businesses, new dams, new hotels, and all mining and agricultural developments, and a great big mandatory payment, poof, slapped down on top. Let me repeat, as I wrote in my editorial in The Spectator Australia this week. What is inevitable if the nature positive plan goes ahead is that billions of tons of iron ore and other natural resource deposits will stay in the ground, resulting in hundreds of billions of dollars in federal taxes not being raised and tens of thousands of jobs never being created. Our downward economic spiral will accelerate. We learnt this week that it was only iron ore and coal that saved the Australian economy from going backwards in the last quarter of last year. Mining, it's our golden goose. But instead of making life easier for investors and businesses, Tanya Plibersek and Chris Bowen's nature-positive plan will make things 1,000 times worse. Indeed, rather than asking which projects do need to go through all this green tape, even the bureaucrats admit it's easier and a lot less time-consuming to ask which developments won't need to go through all this rubbish.
What are some examples of cases where environmental approval is not required?
In the new law, there will be an additional consideration which will be, which will be to ensure that there are no unacceptable impacts which go to the critical protection area and recovery strategy. So ensuring there are no impacts on a critical protection area and then no significant impacts on a nationally protected matter otherwise. Those projects won't require national environmental approval by Environment Protection Australia.
Clear as the mud that the threatened mealybug is grovelling around in. And what might these nationally protected matters be? Why? What a surprise. Along with what you might expect, threatened species, wetlands, marine parks, and so on, spot the two clinchers right at the end. They've even got their own little special bit. Here's Mr. Tregurtha saying the quiet bit out loud.
Protection of the environment from nuclear actions and water resources in relation to impacts from coal seam gas development and large coal mining development.
There you have it. Forget the web-footed, purple-spotted numchuck or whatever it is. It appears to me that this is all about giving a far more noxious species, the flat-footed, low-browed, climate-obsessed Labor politician, even greater powers to destroy the prosperity and productivity of this nation, your nation, in the name of their insane net zero ideology. Again, as I wrote in The Spectator Australia this week, quote, "The original Environmental Protection Act took years to create and ran to thousands of pages. This far more restrictive new set of laws is being rushed through in a matter of months to meet the ideological obsessions and fantasies of Canberra and the Albanese government's inner-city Green Left supporters. This is not a government acting in the public interest, but one shrouded in deception and secrecy. Nature positive is Australia negative. We are taking a butcher's knife to slit the throat of our golden goose." And finally, speaking of the fraudulent teals, as we were earlier in the show, I noticed an article in the Sydney Morning Herald yesterday by the Perth teal, Kate Chaney, one of the signatories to that disgusting letter, here it is, urging more funding for UNRWA, showing the teals are nothing but rabid greens in Armani skirts. Kate Chaney spends the whole article in the Sydney Morning Herald big-noting herself about how Peter Dutton is out of touch. And she, Kate Chaney, is easily going to retain her seat of Curtin because the Liberals don't understand voters' values. And wait for it, she wants a hung parliament next time around so that she and her teal mates can hold the balance of power. No, thank you. The sheer arrogance of this woman is astonishing. Well, I've got news for you, Kate Chaney. The Liberal Party have recently announced they have pre-selected an outstanding candidate to run against you in Curtin, Tom White, a young man who's actually held down real jobs in the real world as opposed to teal jobs in your phony teal world. So I say, if you're in the seat of Curtin and you're concerned about the cost of living and where this country is headed, I have great news for you. You now have a fantastic Liberal candidate to vote for at the next federal election. Tom White. Take it from me. Kate Chaney and the Teals and their phony party have done nothing for the electorate of Curtin other than impose the worst and most hardcore, job-destroying, left-wing government this nation has ever seen. It is critical for the prosperity and well-being of this nation that every single Teal MP is defeated at the next election. So I say, ask not for whom the bell teals. It teals for thee, Kate Chaney. It teals for thee, Allegra Spender. It teals for thee, Zoe Daniels. It teals for thee, Monique Ryan, Kylie Tink and all the rest of you hardcore teal hypocrites. The next federal parliament will be so much better if we're rid of a lot of you. Well, as the transgender movement ramps up, so do extreme concerns for the health of our children, quite rightly. So why, in the face of such glaring issues, do government inquiries into these so-called gender-affirming treatments keep getting knocked back? Joining us now is Liberal Senator Alex Antic. Alex, always great to see you. Before we get into the stuff, there's a story out of the States, I think you might have heard. A family where 2 of the boys and 2 of the twin girls, they've all transitioned, all of them. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not sure what the odds of that are, but there you go. I'm sure they will have happy lives. Not sure there will be many grandchildren following them. But anyway, who knows? We also learnt this week that thanks to a great friend of this show, Michael Schellenberger, about the clinician, this is in the States, who is prepared to recommend a radical double mastectomy for a 16-year-old girl already suffering from liver cancer, despite, wait for it, believing, along with the girl's surgeon and oncologist, that the cancer is probably due to the hormones she had been prescribed. This stuff, Alex, is horrific. Now, you keep trying to get your childhood transition bill up in the Australian Parliament, but it's not happening. Why not, Alex?
Yeah, Rowan, well, look, it's all tragic stuff. I read those reports and I like you, I don't seek to comment on individual cases because we don't know all the facts. But what I can say is that we have a situation now where there are something like 10 times the number of children in this country attending private gender clinics, as they're called, something like 2,000 kids in the last couple of years. That number crept up to, and it was about 200 in 2014. So this is a growing issue in this country. And one of the markers of this is we're talking about kids. We're talking about young people under 18 who can't drink, who can't get a tattoo, can't vote, can't do a whole lot of things. But when it comes to this issue, their feelings seem to be getting listened to in what are very complicated medical and, I think, emotional scenarios. I've got a bill before the Senate at the moment. It's a private senator's bill. It's been sponsored by a number of others, Matt Canavan and Ralph Babbitt, a really cross-party type bill which seeks to put a complete and utter prohibition on children under 18 being able to transition their gender. It seeks to restrain the medical community from doing so, pull funding from these clinics and hold the fort. And I think it's entirely reasonable. I mean, if you think about what we're talking about here, that particular instance you talked about, I saw the clip and the commentary was, we've listened to the kids. It's always we listen to the kids. Well, kids in a court of law under 10, many instances, it varies between state to state, but aren't even given the opportunity to give evidence in court because the courts deem them not to have the capacity to understand the world in which they're around. What we're talking about here is putting a circuit breaker on this, and I moved for that to be sent to a hearing, a simple hearing, not even moving the bill in the last sitting week of Parliament, and the Senate rejected it. Once again, it's happened time and time again across parliaments all over this country. And at some point, politics has got to put a flag in the sand and talk about this. The left in this country do not want to talk about this issue. They say out loud that this will just embolden the hate speak. It will just somehow criticise the young kids.
And yet, Alex, I mean, the thing that we keep hearing from the left and from the pro-trans lobby and the transitioning lobby on this is this idea that, you know, any restriction puts, they say, quote, the lives of trans kids at risk. But when you look at reviews out of the United States, out of the UK, you are seeing an awful lot of cases where people have then gotten into their 20s after undergoing these treatments, having a great deal of regret and remorse for having been pushed in many cases into these treatments by the promises of doctors and by other people in the community, and they're left without reproductive function, sexual function in many cases. It would seem to me that we have to be much more honest in this country that this is an issue that cannot just be this sort of binary thing where it's portrayed as, oh, troglodytes on the right do not want to support sexual minorities, which is how this is being portrayed.
That's right. That's, of course, a completely ludicrous way to pitch it. And I mean, we're seeing these cases, the cases that you describe are now known as detransitioners. And there's a tragic case of a young woman in New South Wales that's now suing a number of different parties because of what she says was the inability to give informed consent, really, about what we're talking about here. And there were the files discovered by Michael Schellenberger, I think, the WPATH files recently this week, which have been produced, which show very clearly that the medical community in this area is very, very conflicted on whether or not this is a good thing or not. We're talking about putting a freeze on this until kids are 18. It's eminently sensible, and ultimately what we are talking about is looking after the interests of kids, not playing politics with them.
Well, you're talking about saving the lives of kids and saving their futures, because we're looking at some horrific consequences of some of these treatments, some of the irreversible surgeries, and just even the hormone treatments that can have all sorts of unintended consequences. And this almost emotional blackmail that's used when this issue comes up about, well, this is going to see a surge in suicide or self-harm. And again, Michael Schellenberger, and I know there's been research out of Scandinavia as well, has completely debunked this notion that these treatments are reducing depression, self-harm, suicide. In fact, their argument is there's evidence that there's an increase in those events because of these treatments. And when these kids have regrets about having significant surgeries and treatments that change their body, change their voice, perhaps leave them infertile, they can have lifelong consequences from it.
Yeah, correct. And of course, we all have to cast our mind back to what many of us were like at 18 and younger, to thank very much so the case that we didn't brick any of that in sand, haircuts and other things being a trivial example. But I mean, it really is true. You know, we look at people, and I know there have been a number of commentators, I think even Catherine Deves has said on Twitter at some point during the course of her time that she considered herself to be a tomboy when she was a youngster, and who knows what would have happened in this environment, you know, just to use that as an example. So look, we are talking about putting a moratorium on this in order to allow children to mature, to give them the care they need, of course. I mean, we are seeing an incursion on the ability to even talk about this in some states in this country with these conversion therapy laws that stop parents and counsellors and others from even discussing this or providing care. One thing you can be assured of in life is when people don't want to talk about a subject, there's something to hide. I say, what are they trying to hide? Let's talk about it. Let's get one of these to a hearing and get the evidence from real medical professionals and the sort of things we saw out of Michael Schellenberger's research, and get them before the Australian people and let them see if they're comfortable with this.
Well, let's just briefly talk about the politics, because, Alex, you put up a bill last week to get this heard again in the Senate. I've looked through, and you thanked on Twitter those people who voted yes for your bill, and great. You know, there's Matt Canavan, as you said, and James Patterson, Holly Hughes, others. I failed to see some of your colleagues like Simon Birmingham or Andrew Bragg or Jane Hume on the yes list. Now, why are your colleagues in the Senate not supporting you? And if they're not, let me just say, right down the lens, please, if the camera can come here. Shame on you. Anyway, shame on you if you did not support. Shame on you if you did not. If you're a Liberal and you did not support Alex Antic in the Senate last week, shame on you, because this stuff is a disgrace. And as Alex is saying, the children of the future rely on you, Liberal Party, to sort this out. Alex, I know you can't slag off your colleagues. That's my job. That's why we have this show here. But why aren't the Liberal Party supporting you in this crusade? Because it is fundamental.
Well, look, I don't know the answer. That's probably a question best left for others. Suffice to say that it wasn't just a number from my side. It was also the entirety of the Labor Party and the entirety of the Greens, most of the crossbench. And some voted no, some just didn't attend the chamber, which, of course, is the other way of doing this. But once again, we're talking about having a hearing. We're talking about discussing it. We're not talking about passing the bill. The whole purpose of going to a hearing is to hammer out details, to try and take evidence from experts. And so it is a procedural matter at the end of the day. Look, I don't know. The answer is probably, or the question is probably better put to others, I would say, Rowan.
Yeah, OK. Well, I think the point is, if the Liberals aren't supporting you on this, shame on them. Every individual not involved. You expect Labor, you expect the Greens not to support this. Rita.
Well, absolutely. And we have seen in North America, we have seen in Europe, from Scandinavia to the UK and elsewhere, a complete rethink in this area where they have done reviews, thorough reviews, and realised they were doing harm to these poor, confused kids, and there's a better way of carrying out these treatments. And in Australia, there's no transparency. We can't even get clear data on precisely what's happening, what's the youngest age where a double mastectomy has been performed for gender-affirming care.
Senator Alexander, we've got to go, but thank you so much for coming on Outsiders, explaining that to us. And the people of South Australia, as well as the people of Australia, owe you so much for actually pursuing this issue. It is critical to future generations, and we applaud you for doing so, and we trust the rest of the Liberal Party and the rest of the Parliament get behind you. Senator Alexander, always great to have you here on Outsiders. Thank you so much. After the break, James's donkey vote, and what a week it's been for James. In a tick.
Hello, you're watching Outsiders. I'm James Morrow, here as always with Rowan Triggered Dean and Rita Safe Space Panahi. I'm going to get to the State of the Union and specifically Joe Biden's bizarre comments about Israel in a moment. But first, tell you what, if Donald Trump had a superpower, it would have to be his ability to drive his opponents into absolute full-on meltdown, making them so angry that they reveal what they really think. Have a look at this woke influencer having an absolute meltdown about, oh no, Donald Trump's campaign promises. And as you do, ask yourself, what's the problem with these?
Here are the first 15 promises he has made if he is reelected. You may have heard of Project 2025, but this is from Agenda 47, and you can read all of these on his website. First, he promises that he will carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in history.
It's already got my vote. What are you doing?
For anyone convicted
Don't promise me a good time.
He will close the Department of Education and return all education standards to the states to decide. He will put prayer back into school, and he will criminalize any race-based advantage programs. He will end the Affordable Care Act. He will ban gender-affirming care for adults and children, and he will ban any federal dollars from going towards gender-affirming care. Which means anyone with government-provided health care will no longer be able to access gender-affirming care except for Viagra and Cialis. Those will still be available. He will propose a constitutional amendment that gives a term limit to Congress. He will deploy the Department of Justice to investigate the Biden crime family and any of his adversaries or political rivals. He will immediately pardon all of the January 6thers, and he will create a task force to investigate anyone who arrested, charged, or imprisoned a January 6er. He will increase the penalties for underage criminal offenders, strengthen immunity for police officers, and deploy the National Guard to patrol woke cities.
Hey!
What a legend! Stop. We can only get so excited here. So let's get this straight. I mean, deportations of illegals, criminalizing divisive DEI nonsense, getting rid of the education bureaucracy that is making American kids as stupid and jelly-brained as Joe Biden. Congressional term limits? Finally investigating the Bidens properly? Whew, I'm sorry, I watched that whole video to the end and there was a lot more. Amazingly, I didn't see any authorization from the Trump campaign there, which is funny because that looked an awful lot like an ad for Donald Trump, not a rant on TikTok against him. Oh, and one more thing. That National Guard idea, well, actually, that's already happening in New York City, where crime has gotten so out of control, they've called out the troops to inspect non-criminal traveler handbags, making taking the subway in New York now as much fun as going through a TSA checkpoint. Okay, so that's a mark against Trump, but other than that, I think a lot of Americans would sign up to that agenda. Now, on to Joe Biden's very big, very ranty State of the Union, which sounded more like one of Howard Beale's monologues from the classic 1976 film Network than a dignified State of the Union delivered by a president in full control of his faculties. Speaking of which, it seems like once again, despite the media somehow deciding, as if in unison, that the Biden speech was fiery. Yes, that's the word that dozens and dozens of media outlets all used to describe it, as if it was, I don't know, somehow briefed to them by the White House, spin doctors maybe. I don't know, I'm just being a cynic here. Well, it looks like there's going to be a fair bit of cleanup on aisle Joe once again. Yes, first of all, there was the bizarre scene where Biden took the bait and referenced Laken Riley, the 22-year-old nursing student from Georgia, alleged to have been brutally murdered by a Venezuelan migrant in the U.S. illegally. Only, well, gotta do it again. He could not get her name right.
Not really. Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of the thousands of people being killed by illegals?
Did he just say thousands of people were being killed by illegals? Well, and he also called Laken Lincoln. I mean, honestly, what a mess here. And he also, well, he called her an illegal, and that hasn't gone down very well with fellow Democrats. Have a look at Nancy Pelosi saying, maybe let's not say the truth about these things.
Now, you should have said undocumented, but that's not a big thing, okay? What's the big thing about it?
No, I actually wasn't even going to ask about that. I was just going to ask more about the moment. But you do think that he should have said undocumented? That wasn't going to be my question.
Well, we usually say undocumented.
Yes, we usually say undocumented. Can't say the truthful word illegal. And here's top Biden advisor Mitch Landrieu.
There has been at least one Democrat that has criticized it. Joaquin Castro has said, like, this using that word and illegal, dehumanizing is problematic. What did you make of that?
That's probably true. He probably should have used a different word, and I think he would know that.
Well, breaking news, I can tell you that Joe Biden has just apologized for having used the word illegal. But at the same time,
pathetic.
The family of Laken Riley has just had a meeting with Donald Trump before he spoke at a rally that's coming up very shortly. But it wasn't just the issues around Laken Riley. There was also this. The president was caught on a hot mic telling other congressmen after the speech that he was going to have a meeting. What kind of meeting? With Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over humanitarian aid to Gaza. But not just any sort of meeting with the leader of the Jewish state. Have a listen.
I told him, baby, so many people. I said, even you know, I should come to Jesus. Sure, just...
A come to Jesus meeting? Hallelujah! My God. Can you just imagine for a second if Trump had ever said such a thing? I mean, the leftist media would be so outraged about Trump using the phrase a come to Jesus meeting that they might have actually defended the Jews. This has led to this exchange before the president got on Air Force One, using obviously the short stairs to go, I don't know, probably on vacation somewhere.
So why does Mr. Netanyahu need a come to Jesus meeting? What are you hoping to achieve?
I didn't say that in the speech.
After the What about after the speech?
You guys eavesdropping on things.
But does that show your level of frustration with him on humanitarian aid? Does he need to be doing more?
Yes, he does.
It's you guys. You're eavesdropping on things. Yeah. As always with Joe Biden, it's the media's fault, everyone else's fault, except his own. And all I can say is roll on November.
Well, let's now go to the US. As James is saying, big week. We've seen State of the Union address, lots happening for Donald Trump. He got rid of Nikki Haley, so he is looking unstoppable for the Republican nomination following Super Tuesday. Christian Whitten joins us. Great to see you, mate. So tell us our thing, you know, how certain, obviously Donald Trump's looking pretty certain for the nomination, but how's he looking for the White House?
You know, it's looking pretty good. It's surprisingly good because if you go back to 2016, Donald Trump always outperformed polls. Never was he ahead of Hillary Clinton that I recall in national polls. And if you look now, he's actually ahead of Joe Biden, both in the national poll, which represents the sort of the total vote, but also in state polls for critical swing states that are either essential to win or nice to win. States like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, which he lost last time, didn't used to be a swing state. Ohio, that's leaned Republican more recently. Missouri has leaned more Republican recently. And so he wouldn't just win if these polls are correct and the election were held today. He would win with a resounding endorsement from the people, a popular majority. You know, no Republican has won a majority of the popular vote since George W. Bush in 2004. But if these polls are correct, Trump might actually do it.
And incredibly, he's fracturing that African-American vote, the black vote, and winning the Hispanic vote by 6 points, the latest polling. So that's incredible in itself. But I've got to say, the Republican rebuttal to Biden's speech delivered by Katie Britt, that was underwhelming, sitting in her kitchen. I mean, why couldn't they get Ramaswamy or somebody impactful to... Well, that was a missed opportunity.
It's always a missed opportunity. Yeah, no, it was this time, but that is the curse, that speech. Almost everyone who has given that speech has had themselves diminished. It's something you should probably just cancel and do away with, or have someone respond, or several people in a spin room respond. It's just, this is the problem with going up against the bully pulpit, against the grandeur of the presidency. You know, he's the head of the unitary executive branch, meaning all power essentially is vested in him. And especially in the setting of the State of the Union, where the whole government comes together, it's just very hard for anyone to compete with that, especially sort of a neophyte that no one had actually heard of before last night or before this week, and from a very solidly Republican state where maybe your debating skills aren't quite as strong in going up against the hard left. So always an underwhelming speech, and it was underwhelming this time.
James.
Well, Christian, you know, all of the polls are saying very good things about Trump and a Trump victory, but there's also concerns that on the ground game and on the money-raising game, that there are concerns that the Democrats could wind up having a big late surge, especially around some of that get out the vote effort. What is the Trump camp and the Republican camp doing to counter particularly that really important get out the vote effort, which I think Australians don't fully understand how important it is, given that compulsory voting is a thing here, whereas in America it's getting your people to the polls. Is there an enthusiasm gap at all that you're worried about?
There doesn't seem to be an enthusiasm gap. Trump voters are fired up. The problem is that in the United States, Election Day has now become election month. It used to be if you were going to be out of town, you could send in and request an absentee ballot. You had to sign something. It had to match your signature. You may even have to go down to a local county office to initiate the procedure. Now, almost anyone in many states, and here in Colorado, we do nothing but mail-in voting. We don't have a Democrat Party machine here, so that's to our advantage. Whereas in places like California or in the city of Philadelphia, Detroit, places like that, you really worry about machines harvesting votes. The Democrats are ahead. They have more money. They're better at this. Republicans lamented this situation rather than doing what we should have done, which is just to copy it and realize that until we can maybe change laws back to having Election Day, we're stuck with this, and we have to be as good as the other side. Two things, the Trump campaign has basically just flushed the leadership at the Republican National Committee, and the new leader there has really said he's going to try and focus on this effort, and that would be a new thing for the RNC to do. The other is just, to hit the issues and hit them hard. Joe Biden in the State of the Union led off with Ukraine. That's no one's top issue, or very few people's top issue, not even their top foreign policy issue, which is China, and the economy, inflation, the sort of general status of America and our culture. That's where Trump can hopefully make up for some of the Democrat money and organization advantage.
Christian, great to have you on. Thanks so much. We'll chat again. Lots happening this year. Lots happening there in the States. Thanks so much for coming on. Up next, Canberra Clown Show in a tick. Roll up, step right this way. It's the greatest show on earth, the Canberra Clown Show, right here under the Burley Griffin Big Top, where this week we learnt the exciting news from none other than ringmaster Cheesy Albanese himself that more than 50% of his clown show are now women. Excellent and exciting news indeed. What a woke circus, ladies and gentlemen, although as yet still no bearded lady in this circus. So we've still got a long way to go. Still lots of laughs aplenty from our favourite female clowns. Here's one of our most popular, a regular of course here on the Canberra Clown Show, which is Katie Gallagher. Now, that's not her on the screen. That's Katie Gallagher. Thank you. Now, I've mentioned before that Labor are planning to introduce a digital ID. That is a digital identification code issued to you by the government. I have warned frequently that this is, in my opinion, the first step towards the Australian government introducing their own version of a social credit system of the sort that is now mandatory in China. This is the sinister, totalitarian system where every single citizen is monitored via their digital ID and facial recognition technology. Citizens lose points for disobedience or for not doing precisely what the government tells them to do and are then digitally punished by not being able to access any online services like banks, welfare, shops, travel, and so on. They have recently even started naming and shaming citizens on giant digital billboards so you can shun your non-compliant neighbours. Ooh, nasty people. Yes, just like we did.
老人们他不会用微信来扫的话，那么怎么办呢？你就竖小红旗儿。他家里这个人家里面有1、2、3、4，有4个信用积分是4分，加一个小红旗5分，一共就9。
Thank you, ma'am. I think you get the gist of it. Of course, a digital ID social credit system only works if digital IDs are made compulsory, and we all have to have one. So, here's Katie Gallagher promising that Labor's digital ID is none of these scary things because it is completely voluntary. Watch closely, you can even see her lips move.
When they say it's going to steal your identity or it's a big government conspiracy, it is not. This is about personal control of your own information. It is completely voluntary.
Completely voluntary, thank goodness for that. Their digital ID will be voluntary, so nothing to worry about. Katie told us so. But hang on, haven't we heard that very same line from Katie Gallagher somewhere before?
Government's position on COVID-19 vaccinations is that it is voluntary.
And how did Katie's voluntary promise work out last time?
The COVID vaccine is now mandatory.
All authorised workers in Victoria must be fully vaccinated
or risk losing their job.
That will be implemented in a partnership between the Commonwealth and the states.
It's not a choice to get vaccinated.
So it looks like when Katie said voluntary in relation to COVID vaccine, Katie the ventriloquist actually meant mandatory for many workers. One more time for us, please, Katie.
It is voluntary, and obviously people will make that decision for themselves.
If you're an individual, you will not have to have one of these digital IDs.
It is voluntary.
Ah, yes, not sure you can always take Katie at her word. One moment it's voluntary, the next it's mandatory. But as Senator Matt Canavan pointed out last November, that wasn't the only great gag in Katie's performance.
Well, the government's already been found out in spreading misinformation about its digital ID bill. Last week, the minister in this place claimed that their bill had nothing to do with a digital identity, when in fact the bill is called, their own bill, is called the Digital ID Bill 2023. It's in the title. I think it might have something to do with digital ID.
And speaking of great one-liners, Katie has always had a fondness for the latest woke colloquialisms. Here she was, back before she was a minister, and was just a Labor hack asking questions of former Liberal Senator Mitch Fifield.
Let me just stop you so you don't waste a line of questioning. I'm just giving you...
I love the mansplaining. I'm enjoying it.
You're loving what?
The mansplaining that's going on.
Well, just talking me through how by not answering the question, by repeating processes which are not related to the question that I've asked.
What's mansplaining, Senator?
Good question. What is mansplaining, Senator? Let's ask the experts.
It's when a man explains something to a woman in a patronizing way?
Actually, it's when a man explains something to a woman in a condescending way.
According to Merriam-Webster, mansplaining is when a man talks condescendingly to someone, especially a woman, about something he has incomplete knowledge of, with the mistaken assumption that he knows more about it than the person he's talking to does.
Okay, got that. Well, let's get back to Katie.
Well, it's the slightly patronising and condescending way that you're responding to my questions.
Well, I would suggest, Senator, that if you're putting the word man in front of some description of what I'm doing, you're doing that which I'm sure you're very much against, is making a sexist implication about how I'm conducting my role as a man.
Well, then the easiest way to do it...
Is that what you're saying, Senator?
Well, what I'm saying is that the way you've been responding to me has been patronising and condescending.
Patronising and condescending. My goodness, at the same time, Katie.
Imagine the reaction, Senator, if I said you were woman-splaining. You're saying that I'm mansplaining.
Well, it is a term that's used.
Is it by whom?
Well, it is a term that's used.
By rude...
Doesn't make
By rude senators. By senators who are seeking to make gender an issue. Stop being a hypocrite.
Well,
Conduct yourself appropriately for this place.
I'm sorry you're so offended by the use of the word. It is a word that's used. I'm surprised that you're so shocked by the use of the word.
No, I'm just calling hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. Thy name is Labor. Thy name is Senator Gallagher.
Hypocrisy, thy name is Labor. Hypocrisy, thy name is Senator Gallagher. Well, let's put that to the test, shall we? Oh, and last week, One Nation's Senator Malcolm Roberts asked Senator Gallagher a perfectly reasonable question and got a load of patronising and condescending waffle as she tried to womansplain why it's not Labor's fault that there's no housing for the record number of migrants who Labor are now flooding the country with.
But we haven't built a dam in how many decades? The water supply.
Moving into a different area.
That's right. I'm directing my question at you, Minister. This has a huge impact on people's livelihoods.
Well, I think the evidence that you've been given is that overseas or migration to this country has supported economic growth. Infrastructure requires long-term planning. It involves investments from states and territories. And, you know, some of the pressures we're seeing in housing supply haven't happened overnight or haven't happened in the last 2 years. It's been a build-up of a much longer period of time when we, weren't experiencing those high levels of overseas migration that we've seen in the last 2 years.
Those high levels of migration we've seen in the last 2 years. Remind me again who's been in power for the last 2 years. Round of applause for Katie and the Canberra Clown Show. What would Dusty Springfield say? Net zany, the mad, crazy, wacko world of climate change policies. We have seen this week, James and Rita, in the name of saving the environment and the planet, what would you do? Why? Chop down lots and lots of trees, Rita.
Well, yes, and make sure they're in a historic forest, not just new trees. Make sure you're chopping down some, historic, beautiful, ancient forest in Germany so you can erect 200-odd wind turbines.
Hey,
Yay.
Chris Bowen would approve. That's the Reinhardswald forest.
Of course,
ancient
my favourite
forest
in
there,
Germany.
all being chopped down in the name of saving the planet. Indeed, Biden has got 22 million acres being set aside for solar panels. They're really looking after the planet,
this is
aren't
really
they?
so. I mean, this actually mirrors the experience we've had in Australia, where studies have shown that we're going to have to chop up like a half of our agricultural land for solar and wind, prime agricultural land. In America, they're going to earmark 22 million acres of national parks for the Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratory to have solar panels all over the place.
Of course
So
they are.
sorry, Smokey. Sorry, Yellowstone. Sorry, all of that stuff. Sorry, Boo Boo. It's all solar now.
Now, James Bond used to drive an E-Type Jag, but there's an E-Type Jag of a different sort now, the electric Jag, only it's not going so well, James.
Yeah, no. This isn't going so well at all. Poor bloke here spent £80,000 on an electric car because I guess he wanted to save the planet and show off how woke he was. Well, anyway, the car took control. He lost all control of the car. Its brakes didn't work. It started speeding down the road at 100 miles an hour, which is about 160 kilometers here. And the police had to chase him down and nudge him off of the road before he killed himself or other innocent people. So this is what you get when you buy these e-vehicles. And guess what? Guess what happens when you wind up twinning those to Katie Gallagher's social credit scheme here? It's all going to be over.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Chris Bowen's always eager to come on this show. He's always begging us if he can. So let's have a listen to Chris Bowen talking and saving the planet himself this morning or earlier.
The problem is with all Mr Dutton and Mr O'Brien's claims on nuclear, when you put scrutiny on them, they crumble like a Sayo in a blender. They just don't stack up.
Rita Sayo in a blender, nuclear. How many teams of spin doctors worked on that particular analogy?
Oh, you know he's workshopped that, whether it's in the office, whether it's with just unsuspecting folk out in supermarkets.
Can you imagine his staffers watching the interview going, yeah, he got the line.
He nailed that one. He nailed that one. We've got, but wait, folks, there's always more from Chris Bowen. Here we go on EVs.
No. This is just a ridiculous scare campaign from Peter Dutton. Peter Dutton is arguing that Australians deserve less choice and should be paying more for more petrol.
I love this. This is just straight out projection gaslighting. So if you're wanting to add a proven technology used in much of the advanced world, you're actually taking away choice. You're not adding an extra option, and you want people to pay more, not less.
I mean,
that's just
this
genius.
whole thing. Bowen also says, we're a dumping ground for all these, high-emitting cars. What are all these countries that are making right-hand drive cars that nobody else wants, specifically for the Australian market? Minister, enlighten us, please.
Exactly. I mean, it is, the whole thing is, but he gets away with it with 95% of the Australian media who just uncritically regurgitate this nonsense because they're on board. They are net zero fanatics more than he is.
Yeah, but 95% of the tradies in this country and the people working the land who actually need their petrol-driven vehicles, exactly, utes and so on, are terrified of what this man is doing to us, as are all those whales out there who are equally terrified. That's it for Outsiders. We will see you next Sunday morning, 9 a.m. During the week, you've got Rita at 11 p.m. Make sure you watch that Monday to Thursday, and James, of course, with his US report on Friday. And we'll see you on Sunday morning. Thanks so much for watching Outsiders.